I'm Aubrey Allegretti, and I'm the Times' chief political correspondent.
Aubrey, a lot of people will have been surprised to see a political career being resurrected, effectively. Jeremy Corbyn, back again. Tell us what we can expect.
So in late July of this year, Jeremy Corbyn launched this movement under the banner of Your Party. He was going to co-lead it with Zara Sultana. Both of them had been Labour MPs, but it's been about 5-6 weeks since this was launched, slightly preemptively, because Zara Sultana actually came out and announced that she was leaving the Labour Party and simultaneously announced that she was going to launch this new movement with Jeremy Corbyn. And then we heard nothing from Jeremy Corbyn for about 24 hours. It didn't seem very well choreographed, and it then emerged that allies of Jeremy Corbyn were very unhappy and disgruntled at the way that Zara Sultana had, in their view, bounced Jeremy Corbyn into announcing this project that was still the subject of very live debate about what it should be. And then 24 hours later, Jeremy Corbyn joined Zara Sultana in confirming that there would be a new movement, but we heard again very little. Fast forward some weeks later, we got a little bit more information. We found out that the holding name for it was going to be Your Party. So Zara Sultana has set out a little bit about what she thinks the future of this party is. It was going to have a sort of broadly pro Gaza focus. It was going to be anti-austerity. It was going to stand for significant redistribution of wealth. She suggested that it could be called the left, which is actually in keeping with something that other European left-wing parties do. There's Die Linke in Germany. She suggested that the new party should focus on advocating things like more time with loved ones, more green space, universal childcare, free public transport, broadly sort of an argument against the cost of living crisis and people worrying about their bills. And she's actually said that the party should build on the strengths of Corbynism. But I think there is an extent to which she is seeking to somewhat carry the torch and take over from Corbynism. But the sort of details in terms of the leadership structures, how many candidates going to field, which elections it's planning to field them in, nitty-gritty detailed policy remains unknown. We've been promised all of that at a conference which I'm told is likely to happen in November.
So this is a new movement with two former Labour MPs trying to come up with a new party. Or I suppose we ought to go back to what we know of Corbynism. So just a quick reminder, how would you define Corbynism and how different is it to Starmerism?
Jeremy Corbyn's been a long-standing Labour MP. He was there in the 1980s, 1990s. He was a vociferous critic of Tony Blair. He vocally opposed the Iraq War, and he had purported arguments against austerity. He advocated policies like renationalisation. He was very pro, for example, wiping out student debt and reducing tuition fees, things that actually Keir Starmer adopted in some instances as his own policies when he was running to be leader of the Labour Party to replace Jeremy Corbyn because they were so popular with Labour members. But ultimately, obviously, Jeremy Corbyn was defeated at 2 general elections, even though he received a higher number of votes overall across the UK than Keir Starmer ever did. And in the years since, he's sort of disappeared somewhat into the background. Keir Starmer, in a bid to make sure there was clear blue water between his leadership and his predecessors, removed him from the party entirely. And in the sort of years since, Jeremy Corbyn has been biding his time, trying to figure out what to do next.
And having lost the Labour leadership, he now sees enough of a gap there. He sees his movement to be different enough to what Labour embodies at the moment to be worth pursuing as a separate party.
Absolutely. There's been a real long-standing tension which predates Jeremy Corbyn running to be leader of the Labour Party in 2015, because prior to that you had most members of the Socialist Campaign Group run to be leader of the Labour Party. They'd all sort of had a go at this and seemed to be of the view that it was best off being inside the tent. But ever since Jeremy Corbyn was kicked out, there has been people around him who have been advocating that all hope is lost in trying to regain control of the party. And so they've ultimately decided that they think the best way to influence Labour is to form a new political party.
And Aubrey, just remind us why Corbyn and his co-founder, Zara Sultana, why they were both former members of Labour rather than current ones.
When Keir Starmer became leader, one of the things that he inherited was an investigation by the Equality and Human Rights Commission into claims of institutional anti-Semitism within the Labour Party under his leadership. And there was an investigation by the Equalities Watchdog, which ended up finding that Labour had effectively broken the law for being found responsible for unlawful acts of harassment and discrimination, and there was a failure by the Labour leadership to address anti-Semitism and inadequate processes for handling anti-Semitism complaints. That was a big moment for Keir Starmer, and he decided to effectively suspend Jeremy Corbyn, throw him out of the party, and so he stood as an independent instead. That's Jeremy Corbyn's history. Zara Sultana's is much shorter, actually, because she stood as a Labour MP at the 2024 general election in Coventry and won, but very soon after the election there was a vote on trying to remove the two-child benefit cap, which is a source of real contention amongst Labour MPs, and she was part of a contingent of Labour MPs, a handful, about a dozen or so, who voted against it, and in the early days of this administration had the whip suspended from them, which means that they can no longer sit as Labour MPs in Parliament, and that's why they both now sit as independent MPs.
Aubrey, in terms of the grassroots, do we have a sense of whether there is an appetite for this new party? Does it have a natural constituency? Where are the polls?
As with any way of measuring what a political party wants to do, you sort of need to poll or measure different constituencies. You're thinking firstly about the membership and then also about the voters. There are over 800,000 people that have signed up to support this. They don't have to pay a membership fee, so the bar to sort of supporting is quite low. And Labour has, I think it's about 330,000 members. And so we know a little bit about actually what Labour members think. There are 1 in 4 who were polled recently and said that they would consider backing Jeremy Corbyn's new party at the next general election. And when you, again, ask a sort of quite broad question of Labour members, who are those people who are still left in the tent, regardless of things having moved on from Jeremy Corbyn's time, we hear that 59% of them want Keir Starmer to pursue a sort of roughly more left-wing agenda. Just 2% think he should move to the right. And there's 35% roughly who think he's kind of on the right track. He just needs to get stuff done faster. So it's really significant that we have over half, nearly 2 in 3 Labour members who think that Keir Starmer needs to be more left-wing. Now, when you think about the general public, it's a little bit more different. And there are polls suggesting that about 1 in 10 members of the public could be persuaded to vote for this new party. But in order for that to work, it's going to need a cohesive narrative. Some of the figures involved in the Your Party movements have a history of machinations and infighting almost overtaking what should be the broader aim.
So do they just end up becoming a movement that splits the vote rather than winning a presence in Parliament?
Quite possibly, although again, how that split manifests is really interesting. And actually, if you look at Labour's strategy overall, it is very much to frame the next general election as Nigel Farage being the real leader of the opposition, the Conservatives completely impotent, dead and buried, useless, ignored. And so Labour strategists are betting that they will be able to frame the election as Starmer versus Farage, and that they think is the way to squeeze the vote on the left, so that there is enough fear, enough concern, that if there is any kind of split on the left, it will only end up benefiting Nigel Farage next election.
And could this movement, could the Jeremy Corbyn party actually end up being a threat to Farage? Because many of his economic policies are quite socialist in many ways.
Absolutely. Nigel Farage has been on a very interesting journey over the last 6 to 8 months, and the sort of political horseshoe, as it is, would appear to mean that Jeremy Corbyn and Nigel Farage do share lots of political similarities. I think there was a sort of game played on ITV's Peston show where they had John McDonnell and Richard Tice answering questions about who said it, Corbyn or Farage, and they both really struggled and got it all wrong. And when they were asked about one person, they said it was the other. So there are lots of similarities, and Reform has been advocating, of course, things like the renationalisation of British Steel, the renationalisation of Thames Water as well. These are things which Jeremy Corbyn had advocated for very strongly and has advocated for many years. So there absolutely could be a case of there being much more in common in the sort of Venn diagram between your party and Reform than it might first appear.